Give me a little intro there, Gomer.
There's no turning back now.
Let's put on the show.
You're listening to the Station 71 podcast. My name is Mario, and this week I'm joined by my co-hosts,
Beth
and Brian.
So we've got a fun topic this week that was actually suggested to us by members of our Discord. I think it was Al and Hockety Pockety. So thank you for suggesting the topic of failed Disney concepts and attractions that didn't really quite work. We kind of took this and ran with it in a different direction than they suggested. But it's going to be fun nonetheless. It's going to be a fun discussion. But first, let's dive into some news topics this week. First thing that we've got up is that the Swan and Dolphin Resorts have announced a semi-alternative to Food and Wine. It's the Sip, Savor, and Stay Saturdays. What it seems like is it's a package deal where you get like a dining experience, kind of. I'm very confused about this. But it looks like on Saturdays from September 19th through October 24th, each the resort's going to have different culinary events that are going to be limited, basically special ticketed events. Each guest that books a one-night hotel package includes 2 tickets to the event, and some of these actually sound pretty interesting. Did you guys get a chance to look at these?
I did. This does look pretty cool.
And it's actually not a bad deal considering you're getting a hotel room.
Yeah, so the package, I guess the best way to start this off is to talk about how much they cost. They start at $295, I think is the cheapest, and then they run up to $395, which is only one package. And the packages that they have, just going to list off the names here and we can talk about any of the ones that you guys think sound interesting. They have Bubble Lounge, Beer Garden, Italian Wine and Bites, Smoke and D's Bourbon, Beer and Barbecue, Food and Wine Classic Limited Edition, and Oktoberfest Beer Garden. So did any of these catch your eye that you guys want to talk about, or do you just want to talk about all of them?
Well, the barbecue one definitely caught my eye.
The Bubble Lounge is really the only one that I feel like would be up my alley. I'm not a beer drinker, and I'm very, very particular about wine, but since the Bubble Lounge looks like it's based around champagne, I think I could get down with that.
I'm kind of thinking I might be interested in the Food and Wine Classic Limited Edition one, like just to see how that plays out. Because that, even though that's the most expensive one, I could see that actually being pretty neat. If they did like full plates of actual food and wine courses.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's actually a little bit longer than the other ones too, so I guess that helps with making up for the price.
Yeah, so general like overview of these, the ones that we talked about at least. September 19th is the Bubble Lounge, which runs from 5:30 to 7:30. It's a showcase of sparkling beverages with small plates. That sounds fairly interesting. I definitely can see that being right up your alley, Beth. The Bourbon, Beer, and Barbecue one is October 10th. Again, 5:30 to 7:30. Handcrafted barbecue classics prepared with the resort's exclusive chef with the best bourbon and beer samplings. That actually sounds really interesting. I didn't read that before. I'm not a big barbecue person, but I could definitely see how that would be
barbecue
fun to
podcast.
Yeah, barbecue podcast, and I'm the one that doesn't like barbecue. But then the Food and Wine Limited one is October 17th, 5:30 to 8, so an extra half hour, and that's the most expensive one at $395. It's, from the sounds of it, food and wine at the Swan and Dolphin, but a more intimate setting.
Well, I don't know if you guys were aware, but Swan and Dolphin has for a while done their own little miniature food and wine thing in tandem with Food and Wine Festival. So I'm guessing since they can't have just like regular booths like Food and Wine had, that this is kind of their new answer to that.
Huh. I've heard about that, but I did not know that like it was as big as a mini Food and Wine thing.
It is. It's certainly not as big, and I've never been to. The only reason I know about it is because my parents used to take like a trip to Food and Wine every year, and they always stayed at the Swan and Dolphin so that they could do that event along with Food and Wine.
I just pulled up an article from last year. Some of these things actually look better than some of the stuff they serve at Food and Wine.
My parents always spoke very highly of it. That it was certainly worth staying there to get to do it as well.
Cool.
This,
I wish I had known about this before the pandemic.
A small, I don't know, like I don't feel like I would have ever stumbled across this if my parents hadn't. It seems like a pretty well kept secret.
Interesting.
Yeah.
This photo of these pan roasted pork dumplings looks really good.
I'm looking at what they had planned for 2020 before obviously it got canceled, and there were food and beverage seminars, and one is all about cheese. That's the one that I would have been really into.
Okay, so we're gonna have to look into this for next year, is what you're saying. All right, definitely something that I'm gonna have to take a peek at, and I totally did not know that existed.
It's always so fun when you are as big a Disney nerds as we are and you find out about something you didn't know. Because I had no idea that this happened.
Yeah, I didn't either. And I'm always like, whenever I find something out that I didn't know before, I'm like, oh, I have to really look into that now.
Mm-hmm.
So our next news topic that we have on here is that Disney Parks Chairman Josh D'Amaro says that the park reservation system is here to stay. We don't really know too much about what the context of this was, I don't think, but it seems like it's more or less talking about for the foreseeable future, they're going to keep this park reservation system here. Is that the impression that you guys got?
That's the impression that I got. And I know I was kind of like on the Discord, I think last night, talking about this with some people that I thought that, this was going to be a very negative thing and that, this wasn't setting a very good precedence for how pass holders are going to be able to experience the park. But I also think that it seems like it was said in passing by D'Amaro, and I think everybody kind of jumped at that. But yeah, it sounds like that they're treating this as until things get back to normal, this is how it's going to be.
Yeah.
I get it. I understand that they want to be able to control capacity in advance because, it's not like there wasn't capacity in place already before the pandemic, but you just didn't know until you showed up. On New Year's Eve or Christmas or whatever were the main times when you would not be able to get in if you didn't get there first thing in the morning. And I understand them wanting to be able to control that in advance and set guest expectation up so that they don't get disappointed when they show up and get turned away. But at the same time, I also, as a pass holder, don't want this to be the new norm. Obviously the duration of coronavirus is here to stay, and that makes sense. I can deal with that. But afterwards, I don't get it unless they change it significantly for pass holders. Even now, I think it's kind of crazy that as a pass holder, you can show up for your park reservation and then you leave. If there's still availability at another park, why can't you go?
Yeah.
Why can't you park hop if there's still availability? I guess they want to be able to control exactly when people are in each park.
I think that's a lot of it, really. I think that them being able to say, like, okay, we are hard limiting it to X number of people a day, but then if a percentage of those people don't show up or make reservations and then don't show up, how are you to limit the capacity of say I make a reservation but I decide I'm not going to go that day of? Who are they to say that I might not show up later if you want to park hop to the park? I think that's where the logic really is.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
And I guess that makes sense. But I feel like if they're going to keep this around, they're going to have to modify it some way that Park Hopper comes back.
I also think that the context of the time period is important too, because obviously with all things going on, like that is why they're limiting it. But they're also talking about increasing the capacity as well. Like that's been a thing that's been talked about for the theme parks a lot recently. I just looked at an article where the governor of Florida said that he's very comfortable with theme parks wanting to increase their capacity. Like I think maybe the context of now is important to the comment of like, this is here to stay, because maybe it's like, this system isn't going anywhere, even if we do increase our capacity to like 50% or whatever they're going up to now.
Understand why they would increase capacity right now. It's not, the pandemic's not over.
The problem that I have with this, aside from that, is Disney isn't hitting capacity anyway, so why increase it? Like, what is that?
That's a really good point. And just like, why rock the boat? They're at least breaking even at this point. They're reinstilling some goodwill with park goers that want to be there. Why are you going to try and rock the boat and get more people, like entice more people to come when everything seems to be going well right now? Why test the water until things are safer anyway?
I feel like we're also headed back into that point of like this stretch of pandemic, which not to get pandemic talk on the podcast, but I feel like we're headed into that stretch of pandemic where people are starting to feel comfortable in this new normal, but want their old normal back.
Yeah. I just hope that people aren't getting too comfortable, because that's how second waves come.
I mean, listen, kids are starting to go back to school. You never know what's going to happen then.
Yeah. Yep. Kids are going back to school. Schools are shutting back down. Crazy.
Well, on that topic, let's talk about the fun news article this week. I know I shared this in the Discord earlier, but I don't know if anybody had the chance to read it. Mm-hmm. It looks like Disney is announcing that there is some fall fun stuff coming to the Magic Kingdom on September 15th. Did you guys take a look at this article, or am I going to break all of this for you?
Break it for me.
Okay. So first thing in this article that we have is that there is going to be a special Halloween themed cavalcade with Mickey, Minnie, Pluto, and pals in Halloween costumes. So for those that aren't aware, what they've been doing now is the characters are riding in on like vehicles or like half parade floats. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like not necessarily doing meets, but they're doing like a mini parade where they'll wave and they'll drive by. That's it. Because that's all they can do.
Yeah, and it's unscheduled, so you don't really know when it's going to happen, so therefore it doesn't draw a crowd.
Yep. So in place of that, they're going to be doing a Halloween-themed one. From the sound of it, it's going to be like the Fab Five with their costumes. They also have like, in here it says you may even spot the Rascally Chipmunks, Chip and Dale in their costumes over in Frontierland. Look for other Disney characters dressed up and riding around in a horse-drawn trolley down Main Street, USA. I cannot talk tonight, apparently. So it looks like they're going to be bringing the Halloween costumes out for that parade, which is fun. But the big thing, speaking of costumes, to bring some Halloween party fun into the parks this year, for the first time, guests of all ages can wear your funniest, Disneyest, most creative costumes to the Magic Kingdom Park during regular operating hours from September 15th to October 31st. So costumes still have to follow the Halloween party rules. No masks or anything that wouldn't be permitted. But it's interesting that they've decided to roll out costumes during the daytime.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. I like it. It's a little way to keep Not So Scary alive in our hearts.
Yeah.
Well, to make it even more not so scary, they've also announced that they're doing limited time food fall treats. So a lot of the Halloween party stuff is coming out. You have the pumpkin spiced waffles. There's like a slush of some kind, a cupcake, the pumpkin Mickey popcorn holder is in here. And they're also dropping some Halloween themed merch as well. So basically, even though Not So Scary was canceled, they're deciding to like roll with it and still do Halloween at Magic Kingdom, which I think is awesome.
That's cool.
It's good that they're doing as much as they can anyway.
I do have to wonder how much of this was planned and they just had it left over. Like they were banking on Not So Scary happening and then they were just like, oh yeah, it's not happening. So let's just throw it out in the daytime.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, opening up the merchandise to like not exclusive to the parties is probably making them way more money because anybody can get it. You don't have to pay extra to go to the party.
Yeah. And a lot of this stuff, like, I think the food options are good because a lot of that stuff is a lot of the big draw to the parties is like the limited time things. But like you said, the merch especially it's big. And a lot of this stuff doesn't seem like it was absolutely set for Not So Scary, but definitely like Halloween fall themed. So it's cool that they're just rolling it out. And it I don't know. As much as I want to joke about it being like leftover from the plans of Not So Scary this year, it kind of feels like it wasn't.
We're getting LaCroix Not So Scary this year.
Somebody's in the next room yelling, "Not so scary."
Oh boy.
Yeah. But the real question, the $1 million question that's on everybody's minds, will they have the candy corn soft serve?
I can't imagine they won't.
That's what I want to know, and maybe I'll have to take a special trip down for it.
So I have Disney Parks blog also posted on August 27th. That's today, right? A foodie's guide to the fall treats. So they have a list of everything that's going to be in here. If you guys want to take a look at that too, I just sent it in our chat.
I think I actually already did, and I am really into this poison apple glow cube, and I need it.
I feel like we've seen that before, haven't we?
I don't remember it. If it has been out before, it's not something that I personally have seen because I'm kind of a casual glow cube collector.
So I don't see the soft serve on here.
I didn't either, but maybe they'll just like low key throw it in.
Although I do have to say some of these popcorn buckets and sippers I'm pretty here for. The Madame Leota one is pretty neat.
I love this straw with the headless horseman.
Yeah, the pumpkin.
Pumpkin, yeah.
I miss Not So Scary. I wish we weren't in the middle of a pandemic and could actually go. Yeah. There's a pumpkin pie soft serve sundae on here. I don't remember that being a thing before.
Dang.
Yeah, but you can get like a pumpkin.
Brian?
You can get like a pumpkin spice frappuccino, probably the same thing. Cotton or candy corn soft serve. That's unique. I want it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Can we talk about this? First of all, how did they get away with calling this specialty beverage the Rotten Apple Punch? It's not very appetizing. Second of all, this is not a drink that they invented. It's Angry Orchard cider and Fireball cinnamon whiskey. That's already a thing called Angry Balls.
I have not heard of that, but okay.
But it's delicious for sure.
Boy, well, I'll leave this to your expertise, but
yeah, I'm gonna pass on that, but it sounds like a fun time, I guess. I don't know. I would be interested if anybody goes down for this to hear their thoughts on like Not So Scary LaCroix, as Brian called it.
I'm so sad that it's not starting until after my trip.
I kind of also wonder, like, I wonder how last minute this was. Like, did they just decide, oh yeah, let's just throw the decorations up? Because we've talked about like how Not So Scary would be going on right now.
Yeah.
So I
feel like they probably had already decided, even though Not So Scary is not happening, we're still going to put the decorations up and probably have some sort of, like, obviously, like we've seen, specialty snacks, specialty drinks, merchandise, etc. But the timing, I feel like, is intentional to where it starts after Labor Day, so that those crowds have already had a chance to dissipate.
Makes sense. So, we ready to talk about this week's topic?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I think this is, like I said earlier, I think this is going to turn into more of a discussion than an actual like history of why these things happened. Because I know we've at least experienced a few of these. And I know that a lot of us have at least looked up most of them, and some of them we've done research episodes about related topics. So it's going to be interesting to talk about, and I'm very excited. Where do we want to start with these? I know we've got some of the exciting ones at the top of the list.
Well, I feel like the ones at the top we've covered pretty in depth, so I think that might be a good place to start.
Sure. So do you want to start with the big dog here and talk about Enchanted Tiki Room under new management?
Let's start with that one.
Oh boy. So I got to get this out of the way right away. This was my first experience with the Tiki Room.
Aww.
Very depressing.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, Enchanted Tiki Room under new management was a overlay of the Tiki Room in which Iago and Zazu had bought the Tiki Room. I'm doing this all off of memory because I don't want to look it up. So they bought the Tiki Room and were planning on like renovating it, but their renovations angered the gods of the Tiki Room. Is that correct? I feel like it is.
Sounds
You're
similar to
close.
what I remember.
They were gonna renovate it. In the middle of the show, Iago kind of gets like irked about how bad the show is, so he starts like cursing the gods, and then that's why he gets punished. But you're close.
Well, he really ended up getting punished in the end, didn't he? The gods set him on fire.
That is the funniest, most like poetic justice example I've ever seen before.
Yeah. But despite all of this, obviously under new management, like Mario kind of hinted at, is the almost poster child for why did you do this? Why did you take this thing that is beloved and make it terrible? It did come, one good thing did come of it.
Uh-oh.
That was so good. I don't think we could do that again if we tried, Brian. Okay, so I want to preface this conversation too with like, this is one of the, I guess, big, like you said, poster childs for why did you do this, but also like, this is a big instance of Disney putting IPs in an attraction. And even though this failed, I don't really think that stopped Disney too much from like taking their properties and putting them in attractions that were already here.
I think the biggest issue with this is that instead of replacing or completely overhauling an attraction, they literally shoehorned existing characters into an attraction that's already there, which just didn't work.
That's true. But then you can also look at it kind of in the same way for like Grand Fiesta Tour, which basically did the same thing, but did it better.
Yeah, that's true.
Which it's kind of funny to look at it that way because, Enchanted Tiki Room, nobody really wants to talk about because, well, everybody really wants to talk about, but not in a good way. Whereas Grand Fiesta Tour, it's like, it's fine. It's all right. Even though it kind of did the same thing. I think the only thing that this did worse, though, is it openly mocked the original attraction, which was beloved by people.
That's the thing. Yeah, not only it, but other ones too. There's also like a shot at Hall of Presidents during the thing too, which is like, I don't know. One, yeah, it's. I don't think it's a good look that you're mocking the attraction, but then you're also like crossing themes. Like I feel like if it's an Adventureland, like it should not even be aware that Liberty Square exists and is able to make mention of it.
I'm also gonna say that I think if this opened as an entirely different attraction, but didn't have the bits of Tiki Room that like, were tied to the original attraction. Like if they did something similar to this as its own standalone like side attraction, it probably would have done well.
I think so. I mean, I obviously would not want to have seen that. I would want it to be as it is now and back to the original, but I think you're right. So in a way, I'm almost kind of glad that this was so bad that they ended up going back to just the original Enchanted Tiki Room.
Yeah. And I feel like, going back to the comparison of Grand Fiesta Tour and this, I feel like the ride that came before Grand Fiesta Tour probably wasn't as beloved, so that people didn't get as angry about Donald Duck and like the Three Caballeros being put in there. This was like already a beloved thing, and I know we're going to get to it later, but so was Journey into Imagination. And why mess with something that's so beloved just to make it IP? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's really a big thing. Is a couple of these we'll see where Disney just decided that they wanted to put something else there and they didn't quite have the idea fully fleshed out. And I think this may also be a case of that, because you can kind of see it in, if you watch the show back, it feels very much like Brian said, they shoehorned these two characters into an already existing thing. And I think that just, to me, says that they wanted to put Iago and Zazu in an attraction, but didn't know what to do with them. So here's a place where they fit in as birds. Let's just throw them in here with like a chopped up story.
Yeah, and honestly, the weirdest part of the whole thing to me is that from like that standpoint, from like a storyline standpoint, yeah, it seems very much thrown together and just shoehorned into the plot. But from a technical standpoint, the work that was actually done to create these animatronics, like they're good animatronics. And it's really sad to think that like that much technical effort was put into this, whereas like from a storytelling perspective, there wasn't.
I also feel like it's probably harder to chop them into a story that's already there. So credit where credit is due. They did a thing, but they didn't do it well.
They did do a thing.
The other thing that we have to talk about, if we're going to talk about under new management, is the use of hot, hot, hot in this attraction. Why did they ever think that was going to age well?
It's a very good question.
Oh boy. Well,
I feel like it was foreshadowing. I'm convinced that some cast member hated this attraction so much that they set the animatronic on fire.
Listen, if you had to work this attraction, I'm sure you'd want to set it on fire too. So I think that's honestly that's a really good place to start, because like you said, it is the poster child of like, why did we do this? And moving from there, I guess we could talk about another big one, which is the next one on our list, Journey into Imagination, which I think the second iteration of this ride holds the record for shortest Disney attraction alive.
It's so fun to me too that they took one of the most beloved attractions, I would say, at Disney as a whole, and probably for sure at Epcot.
Yeah, if not Disney, then all of Epcot.
And they screwed it up not once, but twice.
This whole thing makes me laugh so bad because, like you said, most beloved attraction at Epcot goes from, and I was watching this thing about this earlier today, it went from the highest rated attraction to the lowest rated attraction in a matter of months, which is insane. And it's still pretty low on the tier of things to do at Epcot.
For sure, yeah, it's pretty much the bottom of mine.
Right.
But the one thing that I like in looking at this, because we've talked about this one before in our Epcot tour episode, one of the things that I find really weird about this attraction is that the original version of this attraction promoted the idea of imagination. Of course, it's the Imagination Pavilion. And then the next one gets rid of the two iconic characters, which whatever, we'll talk about that later. But introduces Dr. Nigel Channing as a tie-in for Honey, I Shrunk the Audience. And
sorry, go ahead.
Shove an IP in.
Not even that. The part that gets me the most about this attraction is just like, have you guys watched a ride through of this attraction?
Mm-hmm.
Because the part that gets me is that it starts where you go through a scanner and they tell you have no imagination. It literally insults the guests before they even ride the attraction.
Oh man. I know, that's just I really I mean, I understand what happened and why this turned out the way it did. I mean, it was purely monetary, but still, it's so sad to think that this beloved attraction would just be kind of turned into what it has. And that, I mean, obviously, it's Epcot, and you live by the corporate sponsorship and you die by the corporate sponsorship if you're an Epcot attraction. And you kind of have to accept that. At the same time, like, I'm surprised that Disney, I know it was a bad financial time for them, but that even now that they haven't stepped in to kind of remedy this when it was such a beloved attraction.
I think the biggest takeaway from this is, one, I don't understand why they took one of the most beloved attractions and decided to overhaul it. Like, to me, that just seems like why would you do that? And I know that that's kind of what we're talking about tonight, but why take an attraction's performing so well and say, yeah, we're going to cut it in half and just not do any of the things that people loved about this attraction? If Grand Fiesta, or not Grand Fiesta Tour, if Enchanted Tiki Room is the poster child of bad ideas, this is the poster child of tone deaf Disney employees, I think.
Yeah, I think that's pretty. I think it's a combination of management at the time.
Wow.
And just an overall disconnect between what guests want and what management was pushing, and then the budget. And this is what we got.
So the other funny thing about this to me too is it was so bad that Michael Eisner had to dedicate more budget in a time where they were struggling for money already to retheme this attraction. Not even 2 years later. Yeah, it was open for 2 years.
So they spent the money for an entire attraction and gave us 2 half attractions instead.
But so the other, there's so many funny things about this to me. Like I said, this is the poster child for me in my mind of Disney executives being completely tone deaf, because it's if you look back at what people love about Imagination, the second iteration of this ride is completely devoid of it. The song, Figment, Dreamfinder, the overall theme of imagination, it's not there. And it's just so funny because it's every time I look at old Disney message boards or find people online that still talk about this attraction, because there's definitely plenty of them, those are the things that they remember. And it's just really funny that Disney was yeah, remember that thing you loved? None of that exists anymore.
But, credit where credit's due, we do get to learn about 60% of our senses in the new iterations.
Man.
So, I mean, we don't really even need to talk about the third iteration of this attraction, I don't think, because it's still pretty bad. And
it's still pretty similar to this second one. They didn't really do much to fix anything, and a lot of the, I guess, major storylines are there. Or
it feels like they heard enough of the issues with the second one. The problem is, I think Figment is garbage in this version of the attraction.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
The original Figment is supposedly more childlike, and not in the sense of pulling pranks on the people that are driving through their, tour, but more in the sense of I
whimsical.
Whimsical
wonder.
is a good word. That's a really good way to explain it. And I think that they heard, we like Kid Figment, brought him back. That song that we, wrote for this attraction, let's bring that back. They brought the baseline of things back, but not enough, because, Dreamfinder is right. Dreamfinder's still missing, and the attraction is still pretty horrible. I feel like every time I get off of this attraction, I'm why did I waste the time on here?
Well, it's like you were saying. I think the issue is that, it's almost like they went down and they were okay, guests said they want this, and they were just checking it off and throwing it in there. There was no
right.
They weren't trying to retheme it in order to incorporate these details. or characters or songs back into the attraction. They just said, all right, let's throw it in there. And they did that.
So another thing that I was thinking about when I was looking at this list earlier is like, seeing set pieces from the original Journey into Imagination is so weird now because just looking at the ride, it feels thrown together. Like, obviously I get the idea behind it is it's the Imagination Institute, and like there are parts of that ride where it's very empty. And I know that it's probably because you're not supposed to look in the general direction of like where the emptiness is, but there's a lot of open space in this attraction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so bizarre because like it feels, I don't know. I feel like them taking the boxes off would just make the most sense for why it's the way it is, because a lot of it feels like, okay, well, we need these things back, but we kind of want to keep it the way it is. So what do we do to do that? And that's really the only explanation I can come up with.
Yeah. I don't really get why they would take such a beloved attraction, take everything out that people loved about it, and throw a bunch of money at making like a half attraction, like you guys were saying, when they could have put that towards something else. Like, put that towards something that doesn't have majority positive feedback. Put that towards something new, even.
Well, that's the thing. Like, this is another thing that really kind of boggles my mind about Epcot. And I don't know, maybe this is going to be a hot take because I know there's still a lot of people out there that want old Epcot back. But I think Epcot did need to evolve. But a lot of the ways that it did evolve just seems so tone deaf. Yeah. And it's really weird because, like, I don't know. I think there are parts of the park that at this time were struggling and were probably in more need of an overhaul, or, you know, for example, Wonders of Life is how far away, and that, you know, closed down a couple of years later and just sat empty. Like, they could have spent money to do that, but I'm sure that was probably a result of them like losing the money on Imagination. It's just so weird. And I think Epcot has the most why did we do this stuff?
Yeah. It's becoming less and less Epcot by the day.
Well, that's definitely true. So I put this next one on here, and I feel like we could talk about this kind of in the same way we did with Journey into Imagination, but Stitch's Great Escape is kind of the overall story of why did we do that? And I say that in a way that I've said this before. I think Stitch's Great Escape wasn't the worst thing in the world, but it also definitely was not a good thing to do.
Say, in the past, Mario, you've been a Stitch's Great Escape sympathizer.
I have, mostly because there's not much you can do here. Like, well, yeah, I'm going to say that I think that Stitch's Great Escape, of all these attractions that got changed over, for sure made the most sense of why it happened.
Right, and that's kind of why I've always sympathized with this attraction, is it feels like...
sense.
Right.
I mean, I remember being absolutely terrified of extraterrestrial alien encounter when I was 6 years old. So it makes sense that they would make it more family friendly.
Well, so the wild thing about this attraction, and like I said, I've been an apologist for this attraction before, is it also in a way feels totally just tone deaf, because when you look at why people were scared of alien encounter, it was because of how they pulled off a lot.
Reasons.
Right. It was how they pulled off a lot of the effects. But Stitch does that in a more family-friendly way.
He's cuter than the alien, so
it's the cute alien from the Disney movie that you know, but he's trying to kill you.
Yeah.
This one, I think we could honestly talk about why did they do Alien Encounter the way they did too, because I think both of them, like, obviously we've talked about this before. There's not much that could have been put in this space. It's a very tiny space, and the way that the rooms are set up, it's limiting. But both of the attractions that have come out of this just feel very not Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think extraterrestrial would have actually done really well if it had been put at Hollywood Studios.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree on that.
Absolutely no sense to stick this in Magic Kingdom.
Nope.
Yes, let's go to the fairy tale park where an alien tries to kill you. I also think that's probably part of the reason why it failed is because like this was the family park. Like obviously, you know, Great Movie Ride had the alien scene and whatnot in it too, and they could have very easily just put this in there, but it wasn't, and I think that may have been its biggest fault.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's not really much you can say about like Stitch's Great Escape either, because I think the only good thing that really came out of that was the Stitch animatronic, and rest in peace to that.
Mm-hmm. Even not liking this attraction, it was really sad to see that get torn to shreds, basically.
Yeah.
You know, and this is the one, I don't know, this is the weirdest one for me almost, because at least with the other ones, they either went back to the original, like they did with Enchanted Tiki Room, or they stuck to their guns with Journey to Imagination. But like with Stitch's Great Escape, they literally said that, hey, we would rather just tear this out and have a meet and greet here than keep up the cost to run this. What I can imagine is not a very expensive attraction to run.
Right.
Okay, so I think that this kind of makes sense when you look at them from a capacity standpoint, because I think Imagination may be the closest thing you can compare to this, because like you said, they retracted under new management. But Imagination, obviously it doesn't perform well. We've seen that with a lot of like touring plans and stuff like that. It's always low rated on the list of things to do at Epcot, but it still has a high like traffic run through. And a lot of that can be kind of contributed to how the ride vehicles move, because they don't stop. It's kind of like how Spaceship Earth has a really low weight most times, but there's constantly a flow through it. However, Stitch's Great Escape, while it did eat people, like it did have a large ride capacity, I cannot remember a time that I went in that attraction in the years up to it closing where there was more than a handful of people in the audience.
That's a good point, and one I definitely agree with.
Yeah. I also would not have waited very long to do it though, so
the last couple times that we had done Stitch's Great Escape, I think I saw that it was about to start and was like, yeah, sure, why not? And just walked in. I also feel like a lot of the reason that I would do stuff at the start of Tomorrowland is because I was walking by it.
Yeah. Oh, so you're one of those people. You start in Tomorrowland?
Depends. I like going both ways, but I usually do start in Tomorrowland because there's not much that I'll go back to there.
I guess that makes sense.
So next thing that we have on here, kind of related to the animatronic goodness, is the Disco Yeti, which
this one is the most disappointing of all, almost.
I also
not the most disappointing. I feel like if I had to pick so far, at least Journey into Imagination, not getting to see the original is most disappointing, but this is the most disappointing that is currently still a possibility, I guess.
Yeah.
I think the only thing that I will argue with this being like a disappointment is this was more unintentional than anything else that they did. Like they consciously made these changes to the other attractions.
Yeah, at least they tried. Like they were doing something and then it just didn't work.
But this is also a case of like, if it's not totally broke, don't fix it. And that's exactly what they did here, because the Yeti that they like, this was the big sell for this ride. And I'm sure you guys remember this too, when it was coming out, like all of the commercials and like the hotel room commercials and stuff too, were like, look at this awesome animatronic that we're putting in this new ride. And like, it was the big thing. And then it was there for like, what, a month before it got put in B mode.
Yeah, a couple of months maybe, but not long at all.
Mm-hmm.
This feels like the most heartbreaking of them all too.
Yeah, and I understand, like at the same time, I understand why they haven't fixed it. And I was hoping that after Toy Story Land and Galaxy's Edge and Pandora all opened, that maybe that would pull enough people away from Everest to be able to give it some downtime to fix it. But they haven't yet.
I think it comes down to the biggest question of is it, and it sucks to look at it this way, but is it monetarily worth it for Disney to fix it? And I don't think it is. Like, honestly, people are still riding Expedition Everest over and over again. I think it's still a very, very good attraction, even with Disco Yeti. And the fact that such a substantial like construction effort would have to go into actually fixing this, I think Disney just looks at it and says, no, it's okay the way it is, and it's never going to get fixed.
Right.
I definitely see it that way too. And I also think it's the part that pains me about this. I also look at it this way too. I don't understand why Disney put such a complex animatronic at a point where no one's going to see it. And it pains me to say that because like we all talk about how great the Yeti is and all this, but like the watching footage of it in A mode, you wouldn't know that it was any different than it is right now. I would bet I would bet $100 on that anybody that didn't know this attraction couldn't tell the two apart.
Yeah.
And it's maybe a couple seconds that you fly by it, but I don't think that makes much of a difference. So I don't think this is very high on Disney's priority list because of that.
Yeah.
It's almost like I wish they could have put it in a spot where you are paused for a second, like when the railroad tracks like split. Maybe they could have, I don't know, made that a little bit further off in the distance and put the Yeti there so that you have a second where, I don't know, can lunge at you or whatever. Because when you watch a video of it in A mode that, you know, was taken by someone that worked on it and is still
like in the back lot of because there was that one that was going around for a while too.
And you can see the full motion of it. It's so cool looking. But you're right. If you watch ride through footage of this, even when you like watch the few A mode videos that exist of people riding this, you can barely tell that it's moving.
And I think they learned their lesson with that because even looking at like the newer, more complex animatronics, like the Shamanu songs, it's at a point where you can see the full motion of that. And it's in a weird way, like it kind of, I appreciate that more looking at it from like an art perspective because that's how I view these things. I think that for me, like everybody's always so much like about, fix the Yeti, but I really just don't care that much.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I wish that they would, like, if they were going to fix it, I agree that they should put it somewhere that you don't just fly by it and that's it, because that would be a huge waste of money. But like Brian was saying also, it's not like people aren't riding Everest, even, you know, with this the way it is. So it's really the company's probably looking at it not caring at all. Joe Rohde's the only one that cares, and that's because people won't leave him alone about it.
Probably.
Hey, then you know what? You shouldn't go around making promises.
That's true. That is true.
I will say you got me thinking though, because I would be very interested if that animatronic was at the point where they project the Yeti, because I think that would have been a good time to have that moment, even though it kind of is supposed to build the suspense of the Yeti. It almost feels weird that that's like your first experience with it, and it's not like the queue builds up the Yeti pretty big, and then your first experience is this little tiny projector window screen.
Yeah. But I think you're right in the sense that they learned a lot with this because of the Shamana songs and the way that they did that. It has this nice reveal where you can't really see it until you're supposed to see it, and you get to focus on it for a while. But I think they also learned a lot in the sense that this is such a complex animatronic, they made a backup plan. So if something's going wrong with it, they have that platform that they can lower to work on it, and then they have the screen come up. That's their version of B mode. But
I've never seen the B mode Shaman. I'm actually going to have to look that up now.
I've never seen it in person, but I've seen videos of it. And I appreciate that they have that because it means that when the animatronic starts messing up, it doesn't have to go away forever. Or it doesn't have to just stop moving. You know, they have the opportunity to work on it and bring it back. There's a B mode and an A mode, not just a B mode.
I think it makes a lot of sense too, considering that is kind of it for that attraction.
Yeah.
Expedition Everest, there is an entire roller coaster you get to go on regardless.
It's very, very true.
Well, Yeah, I don't know.
It's
I think-
I wouldn't say it. It does have some cool scenery and other like nice little vibe. It's a I don't know, Pandoran small world, if you will. But you're right in the sense that that's why you write it for the most part, and that's like the big thing.
I also think that the part that this does better, like kind of going back to what I was saying about how the queue builds up the Yeti, the entire ride really builds up the shaman on Navi River Journey. So like if it's broken, it feels kind of weird, I would imagine. I can't find a video of the screen.
I mean, it's the same motions, like it's just a projection screen that they have of the shaman doing the same thing it would do as the animatronic.
Yeah, I don't like that.
I mean, I'm sure people that waited to ride Navi River Journey probably don't like that either.
So the next one that we have on this list is Euro Disney, which I think
Just as a whole.
I think there's a lot to be said about this one.
I think it's weird because the whole Euro Disney fiasco is completely opposite of these in that I think that theme wise and everything the Imagineers did, they did a really pretty bang up job at, but they stuck it somewhere that people didn't want to go to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like they tried really hard. Like they wanted this to be great, but I don't know. Going back to that phrase that we've used a bunch, tone deaf.
Mm-hmm. I think this is Disney at its most tone deaf, which of course is when Eisner's behind the helm makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Oh boy. But really, like, there's so many attractions from this park that I would love to have here. Like, not new updated versions, like literally the attractions they have there would love to see here. But it's just, yeah, Eisner kind of thought he knew best and that he could plop, Mickey Mouse down in the middle of France and people would love it, and they didn't.
Yeah, that's absolutely it.
But at least this one I feel like has made somewhat of a comeback. Whereas most of the things that we've talked about were failures that closed or failures that we want to close or be fixed. This one at least still exists. People still, at least, pre-coronavirus, still went to it. It didn't completely cease to exist in its original form anyway.
Yeah, and I think this is also a good example of kind of a bounce back. Like, it's definitely not the most popular overseas Disney park, but I also think that it's not in the place that it was when it opened by any stretch of the imagination.
No, but I also think that whereas if, with the other attractions that we've looked at, that you can kind of just say, okay, we can let this one slide and whatever happens. You can't let this entire, multi-billion-dollar theme park that you put all this money into just not recover.
Decay.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I see where you're saying that, and I definitely agree with that too. I think this is probably the one that they had to fix the fastest. Oh boy. So on to the next one. We have the Jungle Book, Alive with the Magic, and I put a / Rivers of Light here because I think that what we have now.
That's fair.
I think because Rivers of Light, I think, did a pretty good job of fixing a lot of the issues with the Jungle Book.
I will agree with that, but I think that the problem, the reason I want to talk about Rivers of Light specifically, and maybe this deserves its own category, is a lot of the things that we were told that we were going to get and got from the beginning slowly got pulled from the show. Like the dancers on the floats and stuff like that. I think a lot of that stuff that we were promised were the big sell points for it, and Disney didn't think that through, and I think that that's worthy of a conversation too.
Oh, I definitely agree that Rivers of Light should at least be a topic on this list in some sense. I just don't think it's fair to put it in the same line as the Jungle Book Alive with Magic.
All right, so let's start with Jungle Book, and then we'll talk about Rivers of Light.
Oh my god!
Do you want to lead this conversation, then, Brian?
Did anybody else see this in person?
I did.
Okay, good. Somebody will be able to share. This was. I mean, I think this was a failure just on every level, from a technical aspect. The whole water projection thing, when I saw it, at least, I don't know if it was a windy day or whatever, did not work. And then at the end of the day, it's essentially a placeholder because Rivers of Light got pushed back, and then they just decided to make it an advertisement for the.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And if what you're saying is true, it must have also been windy on the day that I saw it, because the water projections looked like they looked good from maybe one section, and everywhere else was like, what is that a tiger? Is that Shere Khan? Like, wait, what?
It was funny.
It's basically like, did you see the movie? If not, hope you know what we're talking about, but you probably don't.
Literally after it finished, because me and Jordan, I distinctly remember this, had seen the Jungle Book like only a few days before we went to see the Jungle Book Alive with Magic at Animal Kingdom. And like right after the show, I turned to her and I said, if I hadn't just seen the movie, I would not have known what was being displayed on the.
Right.
And even then, it was difficult.
I also wish that Disney would just drop water screen projections. Like, I think that, to me, that's one of the weak parts of Fantasmic too. And I wish that they would stop trying to make them work. They worked well when they first came out, but that was it.
The problem that they have with these water projection screens is that they try to make them too big. When they're small, they work well. Like in Fantasmic, for example, all the little bubbles when they float up, like those are very small pictures, and they're compact, so they work because you can see what it is. But once the water screen gets big enough, then it starts getting really distorted and it looks weird if you can even tell what it is. So I feel like if they're going to use these water screens, they need to make them compact.
Yeah,
I agree. And here's the thing, though. I think that obviously they're trying to compete with a full-on nighttime show that usually has fireworks or something else, and they need something big, which is why they try to push for that. And maybe I'm in the minority here, but honestly, I don't think Animal Kingdom needs to have a big nighttime spectacular show.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And obviously, they can't have fireworks because of the animals, and that's the whole reason that they tried to do this without fireworks. But I feel like another reason that this failed was not just because of that. It was because you couldn't really tell what the story was. Like, sorry, I'm skipping a little bit ahead to Rivers of Light now, but obviously, like we said, with Jungle Book, you couldn't really tell what the story was either, so it's relevant. But you couldn't really tell what the story was with Rivers of Light. You couldn't really there was nobody to connect to. The music was pretty, but it didn't really evoke any emotions. And then the big finale was like this lotus thing with fire. It was just it just felt like very smushed together. Like, how can we fit as much visual stuff in as we can? But they didn't focus on how it would make people feel, other than this is pretty. I see pretty thing,
Yeah, and I think that they could pull off a nighttime show in Animal Kingdom. I think they could. But I think
Tree of Life projection mapping things are really cool, I think.
Right. And that's kind of what I was leaning more towards too, is I think that they could do something like that and it be fine. I also think that there are like fireworks in a nighttime show aren't a necessity. Like you said, the Tree of Life, the awakening of the Tree of Life is really cool. And I wish that they would make that like their staple nighttime show. I think you could get away with that and it would be fine.
The only issue I see with that is that just from a logistics standpoint, like projecting makes it a nightmare getting through there, and the park's just not really set up to have everybody stand in front of the Tree of Life to watch a nighttime show.
Yeah. But why can't they do something like Illuminations, where they have something in that lake that they can use projection mapping on?
Yeah, that would be something good for them to do.
I also wonder if Rivers of Light is redeemable at this point. Like, I think it still draws enough of a crowd, but I wonder if they'll take it and do something with it where it's like, I have to go see this nighttime show. Like, you know, Phantasmic has a place in our hearts, and whenever they put a show in at Magic Kingdom, that has a place in our hearts. And Illuminations was so beloved too. Like, I think that they could do something there, and they could make it worthy of I have to see this when I'm on my trip, but I just don't think Rivers of Light is that.
Yeah. And it also doesn't help that there are so many technical issues with it constantly. Like,
Yeah.
I've never seen the show in person because every time I've tried, it starts, and like the one time I tried to see it, it started and then it stopped and they reset it. And then it started again and stopped, and they're like, all right, it's canceled. And that's, like, from what I've read, a very common occurrence because of the technology that they use with I don't remember what it's called, the navigation of the boats, essentially.
Yeah.
But it doesn't leave a good taste in the mouth when you wait all this time and you stay in Animal Kingdom until the very end of the day. And then it's like, sorry, the show's canceled. Hope you can come back another time.
I do also think that this is a good example of Disney overhyping something a little bit too, because I remember when they were pushing out Rivers of Light, and it got delayed so much, but they kept saying like it's going to be worth the wait. It's going to be so good. Like, this is what you can expect from it. And we got the Jungle Book for so long. I think that put a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And then the fact that, like you said, it just can't get itself off the ground. It feels rushed, overhyped. Like, it feels like there's so many things that just went wrong with the show.
Yeah. And at that point, they had already pumped so much money into it. They knew there were technical issues, but they couldn't afford to
backtrack.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately. So,
well, supposedly it's gone for good anyway, so.
So this next one, keeping it in Animal Kingdom, I put the Discovery River boats. Have you guys looked into this at all? Because I found this on a list of like worst Disney ridery themes today, and I fell down a little rabbit hole that was rather enjoyable in the worst possible way.
Yes, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but I feel like I wrote this as a child.
Okay.
I know I was at Animal Kingdom the first year it was open, but I don't know. Yeah, this was a strange attraction.
So
this was like an advertisement for the park within the park, essentially.
So let's talk
we're
about.
We're already here.
Let's talk about this attraction, and then I want to talk about what they turned it into, because that's the part that's the most enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what this attraction was, it was a boat ride that took people from like through the lagoons in the park, which supposedly when it was designed, it was mostly used for it was going to be used for transportation, but because obviously Beastly Kingdom wasn't built, they couldn't really like use it for its intended purposes. So part of what this attraction turned out to be was a boat ride where they would bring animals on board the boat, and guests would get to view them, like smaller animals. It doesn't say what animals were a part of this, which is interesting, but I think that's
probably like small snakes or like bearded dragons.
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of turtle,
I saw something about an iguana on here. Like,
yeah,
stuff like that makes sense. And I think that that's cool. Like, that's a cool concept to me. And I think that as strange as that may sound, like because of what Animal Kingdom is, it fits with the park fine.
Yeah, I think that's the concept is really cool.
So skipping right into what it turned into, because this is the part that makes me laugh so much. In 1999, the attraction was rethemed to the Radio Disney River Cruise, which played commentary instead of, oh, just wait. It played commentary instead of the onboard, like, animal, like, handling stuff from Radio Disney DJs, just plain Mark and Zippy. The guests were also told that the broadcasts, the songs that they were listening to, were coming from the top of the Tree of Life.
What?
I love this. I love this so much, because this is just Disney not knowing what to do with something and just panicking.
Jesus, that's awful. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't fit in with any kind of theme by any stretch of the imagination, especially at Animal Kingdom, which has the best at keeping a coherent theme.
Yeah.
And why would you think this is the thing? If people weren't writing it, if that was the problem, that people weren't writing it enough and they wanted to get some hype, why do you think people would come on to listen to Radio Disney instead of coming on to see an iguana in front of them? Who would choose that over the other?
Well, what's more hype than a Radio Disney DJ, Beth?
Something, what's more hype than something you can literally do from your house, you know?
Right. And the funny thing is, apparently, like, when this ride opened, it went from one dock to another, and then when the Radio Disney DJ boats, whatever this was, came out, they just circled the Tree of Life and went back. So a lot of the reason that this closed was because guests were just confused about what it was supposed to be, which is so funny. Like, imagine getting on this boat ride and you're like, oh, I'm going to take this peaceful boat ride around the Tree of Life, and they start blasting like Radio Disney, and then you get off and you're like, what did I just do?
Man. I really think that this concept, like the original concept, is really cool, and I wish that it had stayed around long enough for me to experience. At least I don't remember experiencing it. And this is something I would like to see again, you know, if time and funds would allow, because the whole point of Animal Kingdom is conservation, and people connect to an animal if they can see it and maybe even touch it. I don't know if that was a thing, but like, I volunteered at my local zoo for 4 years, and that's what I did. I would hold animals, and certain ones you could do like a gentle touch on them, and that made people really connect with an animal that they maybe would never have the chance otherwise to touch or see up close.
Well, see,
Yeah.
Beth, I think conservation was actually the biggest issue here because they decided to reduce, reuse, and recycle this attraction.
Well, it's so bad.
But
So the other interesting thing about this too, we talked briefly about how it was kind of like an advertisement for the park within the park, which I think, funny enough, in this location kind of works, because we didn't really talk about what was advertised here. So there's the obviously the animal sculptures around the Discovery Lagoon. There was the iguanodon that was like playing in the water outside of Dino Land, which is kind of cute, like nice little nod to the attraction. And then originally there was a unicorn statue that would appear near one of the bridges, and then there was a like dragon-shaped rock formation outside of Camp Mini Mickey, which was supposed to be an advertisement for the Beastly Kingdom. So like there was stuff in here that like made sense with it, and part of what this article cites is it being like the reason it failed is because there was little that you could see that was different from the boat.
yeah.
So it kind of makes sense, but it's also one of those things that like if they had just kept it, like you said, as small animal handling on a boat, like I think that would have been a huge hit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people love the Jungle Cruise, but that's for different reasons.
Yeah. Maybe they could have even done had little puns with whatever animal they were handling, and had
Maybe.
made it almost a mini Jungle Cruise.
Well, and the reason I'm thinking about this now maybe is because it kind of, if you look at another attraction that was at Animal Kingdom that we probably should have put on this list, the Flights of Wonder to Up Great Bird Adventure conversion, like the original Flights of Wonder show was basically just let's show people birds and the cool things they can do. Like, what was stopping them from making their riverboat something like that?
Yeah, definitely. They'd have to shove some IP in at some point, though, huh?
They tried Radio Disney.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's true.
So do we want to talk about Up before we jump into this next one? We have some time if we want to talk about that a little bit.
I think it's
I haven't
definitely worth
seen it.
mentioning.
But I can't imagine that, again, like Brian said, Animal Kingdom has the most cohesive theme of all the parks. It's conservation, and Flights of Wonder focus so heavily on that. It's, here's a really cool bird. Here's why they are, potentially endangered if they, were, or giving the backstory, making people care about these animals and care about their habitats. And then they're like, let's shove some characters in here and have real people on stage also.
Oh, that's absolutely the biggest thing that like takes away from this attraction was it went from having this story and having like not even a story, just like a general overall theme to, hey, up's a thing, let's put that here.
Yeah.
I think what kills me the most about this, though, is that at least when you see a lot of these other attractions where they kind of shoehorned an IP in there, it was kind of like a recent movie or something that they were really trying to advertise. But like Up wasn't even new when they did this. It felt so unnecessary, and especially where there's already this IP already exists pretty heavily in the park and other places where it's done well. Like with the whole Wilderness Explorers, I think that's an awesome way to include the Up IP in the park. But shoving them into Flights of Wonder was just, it was a shoehorn. And I think anybody that goes and sees this attraction can see how much of a shoehorn it is.
Yeah, it's not tastefully done.
Not at all.
Well, and the funny thing is, like, if you look at it, you can kind of like try to make the connection. You're like, well, Kevin's a bird. This show's about birds, so sure. But like,
what a
why
connection? It's like if you're gonna put an IP in there, at least make it like super relevant.
My other favorite thing about this is, again, this is Disney being totally tone deaf, where it goes, okay, what did you like about Flights of Wonder? That dollar bill trick? Yeah, it's still here. Like, why?
Sure.
Why?
I mean, I just feel like that show was already something that people liked. Why did they? This kind of the theme here. It was a thing people liked. Why did you mess it up?
Yeah.
Well, so breaking that theme, I think this next one that I have on here, and I know I've kind of talked about these before, is not a thing people liked, but a why did you do that? It was a waste of time and space thing. And that's The Legend of Captain Jack Sparrow and the Journey into Narnia at Disney's Hollywood Studios. I feel like every time I talk about this, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Do you guys know what I'm talking about here?
What you're talking about, but only because you told me about it, not because I ever actually experienced it.
So this is one that's kind of weird because I can, again, see the justification for it, but I also feel like it was very unnecessary. And I know when I did the Narnia version of this, it felt like a total waste of time. And I left going, why did I do this? So basically what these were in the sound stages at Hollywood Studios. They used to have these mini attractions where you would walk in and you would see movie props from either Pirates of the Caribbean or Narnia. You would watch a brief movie. You would walk through a door. There would be one person, like live actor, doing a bit, not even from the movie, but getting you involved in the world of this movie on like a soundstage set that was designed to be a part of the movie. And then you'd walk into another room and there'd be more movie props and you were done. And that's the entire attraction. And it stayed around for so long. I just kind of, it fits with the Hollywood Studios theme and I get it. But let me pull up some pictures of these because I think if I show you, it'll make more sense.
Like, I love the idea of being able to walk through a set. Obviously, I have talked about Backlot Tour many, many times because that was one of my favorite things at Hollywood Studios. So this seems like it could have been a cool concept that they just made it weird and messed it up.
Okay, so first of all, tell me you don't remember seeing this at Disney's Hollywood Studios because I feel like this was there for the longest time.
I remember that, but I don't think I actually went inside of it.
Yeah. So I want to say these both existed at the same time, but I'm not 100% sure. I want to see if I can find an article that's got a bunch of pictures. Either way, it was very bizarre, and I can find. Here's a picture of like the inside and the person. Actually, I think I'm not even sure that the Jack Sparrow one had a live person in it. That kind of looks screen projected. I'm not convinced.
Yeah, I can't tell if he's just got like a spotlight on him or that is a projection.
So like this set, this Pirates one was I think smaller scale because a lot of this looks like the same room, and I know the Narnia one was at least bigger. Because I have very vivid memories of this, and every time I think about it, I'm like, that was the biggest waste of time that I ever did.
Yeah.
So here's the sign for Narnia. Which, like, I don't know if that's going to ring any bells, but inside there were, here's a guide to Narnia at Hollywood Studios.
I have absolutely no knowledge of this.
Yeah, I definitely didn't do this.
Okay, so this thing, you have to click the link and it'll take you to like some sidebar pictures of the attraction. But the inside, you walked into one room. There were these snow-covered trees. I'm going to send you a picture of those. And a big screen in the middle that played like a trailer for the Narnia movie. You walked into another room, or I think you may have actually still stayed in the same room, and someone would come out dressed as whatever.
Prince Caspian.
No, it was because this was
the White Witch.
Yeah, there it is. That's the lady. So she would come out. She would talk to you for like 5 minutes, and she would tell you like a little story. And apparently, she cursed the guests, which this article that I'm looking at tells me. And that was it. It was over. You left and you were cursed.
Huh.
See? Why did they do that?
It sounds kind of cool up until that point. Like, it sounds very unnecessary. Like, why are you... I guess if they had done it at the beginning, like after the first movie, and then they could have given it little updates here and there for the second and third movies, then it would have made sense. I don't know if that's what they did, but looking at this link that you sent, enter through a portal and see what rich enchantment has been created with a recreation of the sets used in the film. Pass through a rockwork archway, enter Aslan's stone table chamber through the underground vault where Aslan sacrificed himself in the first movie. Stand amidst gorgeous stone carvings. Like, all of this sounds really cool to me. All of this sounds like old Hollywood studios, and I like that.
Yeah. I will say, watch the video because it sounds cool, but it's very much like, I guess keeping with the theme of old Hollywood studios, it's in theory very cool, but very cheap for them to pull off. And I think that's why it didn't stick around as long as it well, obviously it didn't stick around very long at all, but why I have very vivid memories of like not caring much at all for this attraction.
Yeah.
Apparently they were all also in the same building, so there clears up that mystery.
Shame some of these things that I feel like had such cool foundation. Like, they laid the foundation for a cool attraction, and then they just totally muddied it up.
It's good in concept, not in execution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, imagine a Narnia attraction where you can walk through the wardrobe and you enter the place with the snowy trees. Like, that in and of itself makes me want to do it. Just that one part.
I will say some of the sets, I remember them being really cool because all of it was in one room. I remember that like very distinctly. Like the part that has the picture of the White Witch is like all in one spot, and you felt like you were on the set, and that was neat. But when it came down to like what actually happened in there, it was very much like I just walked into an actual ad for this movie.
Yeah.
I do think like I kind of almost wish that Hollywood studios did have more of like you're on the set for these things and not like you're on the set, but here's also an advertisement.
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't that, I think it would have been okay.
Especially in this day and age of Instagram with all the photo ops, like if you could pose in front of the wardrobe or pose with the trees, like the snowy trees, and even have maybe some props that people could hold or whatever, that I feel like would be a big hit because people love to take photos in front of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So last thing that we had on here was more an honorable mention than an actual why did they do that? And that's Test Track 2.0.
I put this on here because I was curious too about y'all's opinion. I know this is kind of divisive in the Disney community. I'm not a very big fan of the overhaul.
I feel like it was a cooler concept originally, for sure. I kind of understand why they did it, but I feel like they half did it. I feel like it's Tron, but a secret.
So,
you know?
Yeah. Here's my take on it. I don't really know how this falls. I think old Test Track, like the original Test Track, was really cool, like you said, Beth, but I don't think it would have aged well. I think that if Test Track was still around the way it looked when we first saw Test Track, everyone would be saying it needed an overhaul. It would be needing some kind of retheme. And I think you're right. It does feel like they kind of half did it. But I also think it had a lot of potential to be probably the most Epcot attraction in Epcot right now, which is what's really wild to me. I think that there's a lot of potential with like the futurism of cars and how we design cars that's talked about in the queue. But I also think that the part that it looks like they spent the most time on is the queue. Like all of those videos of people talking about, you know, how we design cars and what's going to go into the future of it. And then you get to build your own car, that when you get to the actual attraction itself and a lot of the set pieces look very cheap, it kind of almost cheapens the experience.
Yeah. Also, I feel like you either care about cars or you don't. And if they wanted to make this, I don't know, hit on more people's interests. And honestly, I don't even remember what they talk about in the videos in the queue. It's been a while since I've ridden Test Track, but if they had made it more of a concept, like I guess if they had explained the concept better and if it actually had any consequence on the attraction, because you build this car and you get the little bars of like, oh, this is the efficiency, this is the power, blah, 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 blah. But I feel like it doesn't really make a difference in the end. It's just like a randomized, like, oh, this person's car won. I could be totally wrong. That's just how it has always felt to me.
No, I think you're right.
So it became a game of who can make the stupidest looking car, you know?
Yeah. I also think I always felt like it had more weight in the original version of Test Track. Like, I don't know, that you were going through the actual pieces of the testing grounds. This, like you said, if I don't know how they would be able to do it so that your car had an overall effect on like the actual vehicle. Like maybe if you went through the section where all the bumps are, like if your car wasn't built for that, you would feel it more. I think that would be harder for them to pull off, but it would work better. I think that they had this idea, but they just didn't know what else to do with it.
Yeah, I agree. And I also agree with you in the sense that, like you said, that the concept of the original would not have aged well. And thank God they got rid of the walk around crash test dummy characters. Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like it's a bunch of randomized, like it's a bunch of random stuff and then vroom, go fast. And then it's over.
Well, so I kind of want to go back to another thing that you said too about not really knowing what the attraction's about and how you kind of you've never really watched the videos in the queue. And I think that's a really good point that we need to talk about if we're talking about this too. Because if you watch them, a lot of them are like there's parts of the video talk, like there's kids where they'll interview them and they'll design their own cars and then they'll like transport them into like a computer software where it builds the car, which is kind of like setting you up for designing your own car. But then there's also people in the actual videos that are talking about like where cars are going in the future. And it's hard to get all of that because the parts that matter with that are at spots where you're rushed right through it. And
also, question, does the Fast Pass line involve these videos?
No. It's all in the standby.
Okay. That's why I've never seen them then.
I was about to
Right.
say, I wasn't even aware there were videos. I think every time I've been on this since the update, I've done a fast pass.
Me
So,
too.
okay, did you guys do it before Fast Pass or not before
Mhm.
Fast Pass before
Before the
the
overhaul?
yeah? Did you do
Yeah.
the standby for that?
Mhm.
So in the first room, which is almost never crowded anymore, I remember that being like a huge switchback section where it was kind of like a garage and there was all these things. There's still stuff in there. There's still cars and stuff in there. But you come out of that room and then you go around. It's almost like a projection mapped section where there's like this little kind of car model on a spot, and they projection map different designs onto it that are like kids' car drawings, and then you hear throughout the room like the kids talking about what they drew for their cars and why they drew it like this and this and that, and then you go into another side where there's like a projection screen where it's people talking about stuff like that. So it is very easy to miss it, and I think obviously there would have been no way for them to do that in the fast pass queue because you're trying to get through as quick as possible. But the fact that they tried to put all of this in to make it educational at the spots that they did, it feels very weird because most of the time, only part that people care about is building your own car.
Well, it's the only part I've experienced, so
I also don't think don't make this me saying that you need to go through the queue to get the experience of the attraction, because I think this is one where it's there, but it doesn't work very well either.
Well, hey, there is no fast pass right now, so maybe I'll try it on my next trip.
And I will tell you, you'll walk right by them still and you'll be like, okay, that was it. I don't know. I think the overhaul, the biggest thing that they didn't do right with it is they cheapened out in spots on the inside, and they also tried to do things, but they didn't do them in the right spots.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's where I land on Test Track.
Just
Kind of
like,
wish,
if they had almost even done like I don't want to say mission space like completely, but you know what the point of the ride is, whether or not you get in the fast pass lane. You know what I mean?
Well, and I also think the problem with Test Track, and the problem that they're never going to get over with Test Track, is it's the thrill ride in Epcot. And
yeah. Well, Guardians is coming.
Yeah. Hopefully
That'll
they don't
be the thrill ride to, I don't know, that people will be, I think, really excited about.
Hopefully they don't do the same approach with it, though. I know that we've kind of talked about Guardians too, and like kind of wondered how they're going to do, if they're going to do any kind of like edutainment thing in there, or if it's just going to be like it's a Guardians of the Galaxy roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of hope that they lean in that direction, because if not, I think that would probably end up on my list of failed Disney concepts, is like the concept of edutainment in Epcot.
Yeah.
Damn,
Just feels like Disney doesn't really. It just feels like Disney doesn't really know how to do them anymore. Like,
well,
they're still trying, but they're not They're not sticking the landing.
Yeah, I feel like they had a little bit of a comeback, or at least it seemed like they were trying to bring back more edutainment with the Muppets Mobile Lab, and then they had, I never got to experience it, but they had that little show in one of the Innoventions that was like a lab of some sort.
Colortopia, or
no, it was semi-recent, and it didn't last for very long, unfortunately, because I never got to experience it, but it was like a classroom almost, and you did experiments, if I recall correctly. But there were a couple of things here and there where it felt like they were trying to bring back edutainment a little bit, and that maybe it didn't go over the way that they wanted it to, or they just didn't want to pump more money into it. But it feels like they really have just kind of given up on that as a concept.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Guardians will come out and it'll surprise us all.
So, I mean, realistically, think of what has been put into Epcot that's still there recently. That's edutainment.
Well, all of the recent additions haven't really, because you've got, going back most recently, you could say the Beauty and the Beast sing along, which I was tempted to put that on here, but I didn't want to talk about that. Frozen doesn't have any edutainment involved in it. And then I want to say the last thing that they did outside of that would have had to have been probably Test Track, right?
As far as like an actual like bigger attraction, yeah.
Wow, that feels weird to think about. Epcot really didn't get love for a long time.
Wait, hang
Yeah.
on. Did Mission Space or Test Track come out first? Didn't Test Track come before Mission Space?
I think Test Track came before Mission Space, but
Mm-hmm.
Talking like overall
update.
rethemes and updates and whatnot. I mean, you could argue that Mission Space Green came out recently, but that didn't do much to change anything. So I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, think of the stuff that's coming. It doesn't sound like it's edutainment. Maybe like the Spaceship Earth refurb, if that ever happens, sounds like edutainment.
Moana kind of seems like it too. I mean, that's all about water cycles.
But like Ratatouille, Cherry Tree Lane, I think that got canceled, but
yeah, I think
Harmonious
Showcase, which are supposed to be more about cultures, which I can get behind that. I'm not expecting edutainment as much in World Showcase.
That's what I was going to say too. I think World Showcase, it's a little more forgivable because it's supposed to be not the edutainment part of it, but you also still have stuff that teaches you about culture and whatnot while you're there. It
even feels like they're moving away from that. Yeah,
that's a whole different discussion too, because we could talk forever about the shoehorning of IPs in Epcot. I don't know. It is very weird to think about. I do think edutainment is mostly dead. And even the stuff that you started to bring back too, like Muppets Mobile Lab is actually an old thing that they brought out of retirement.
Oh, I had never seen it before.
Apparently it was back with the living character initiatives when like Lucky the Dinosaur and stuff was around, but they rolled it out as kind of like a placeholder thing recently.
Yeah.
I don't know.
At least we have Animal Kingdom for edutainment.
Animal Kingdom,
even Pandora has got a conservation message, and even if the learning that you do is about a fictitious place, at least you're learning something.
You know what? I will give 100% credit to that too. My love for
tie it
Hollywood
into
Studios,
real life, you
right?
know?
My love for Hollywood Studios died when that park died, and I've moved on to Animal Kingdom since. And that park is leagues better than it has any right to be in terms of like what Disney's doing now.
Saying it for years.
Yeah. Once you get past the fact that it's really not a zoo.
Not.
Oh boy. Well, I think that's a good place to stop this discussion. We've talked about this for about an hour and a half now. So unless you guys have any final thoughts or anything you want to bring up before we wrap this week up.
I think so. I do feel like we're missing something, but I don't know what it is.
If there is something that you think of, let us know. This is a good time to say, we've got conversations on Discord, and we share our episodes on all of our social media. So let us know or email us the thing that we missed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop recording and we can chit chat about other stuff. All right.